UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military black projects, false flag alien invasion psyop, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join UFO historian Don Ecker, MUFON State Director for New York Chris DePerno, retired veteran pilot Commander Cobra, and well-esteemed host and researcher Martin Willis as they discuss the latest news and topics regarding UAPs with a no-holds-barred approach on UAP Crossfire.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to UAP Crossfire. We are Commander Cobra-less and filling in for him right here, Marc D'Antonio, the one and only. And our guest for this evening is, did I point the wrong way?
That's okay.
Well, it might be the way it looks to you. But anyway, is Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio. And of course, as always, we have Chris DePerno, MUFON of New York, and the one and only Don Ecker. And tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about, I was talking with Dave Scott, and he basically mentioned that, you know, with all the government, all the focus on the government these days, we're kind of seem to be losing touch about, you know, the experiencers, the UFO encounter people, things like that. It's all focused, seems to be focused on the U.S. government, what they're doing next. And it all started this last year. The real hubbub started with David Grush coming out June 5th. And it's all kind of been a focus on that type of thing. So why don't we kick it off, Dave? Why don't you give us your opinion on that the whole idea of that situation?
Well, I want to state to your audience, first and foremost, I am one of the only actual real journalists in this field who went to school for journalism, worked in journalism, and who is also an experiencer of the UFO and ET phenomena as well. And I don't say that to brag, but I say it just to kind of line up my resume a little bit that, you know, it's very hard to stay away from the passion of UFOs and still try and call things down the line equally as a journalist should. But one of the things I noticed over time is, as we have since 2017, when the New York Times article came out, it really sprang into motion the scientific side of what UFOs are. Of course, we all got the acronym UAP. Some of us love to hate it. Others just use it because that's what everybody else is calling it. But one thing I had noticed was that none of the experiencers were having a say anymore. And unless you were part of the military, your experience absolutely meant nothing. And it really culminated back in May when I had a famed scientist on in the UFO field, and I'm going to leave his name out of it for right now, basically tell me that experiencers need to get the hell out of the way, quote, end quote, because they are causing nothing but problems for the people doing the real work trying to figure out what these UAP are. And I found that very insulting. You know, Gary Nolan from Stanford University even came out about 2 months after that and stated that the scientific community has to be more accepting of experiencers because they are the first lead into anything that happens, whether it's abduction, whether it's crop circles, whether it's cattle mutilation. It's them who are getting the start on everything. So I think there's been a real disservice in this community as we focus on government and confirmation, because I don't believe in disclosure. I believe that the experiencer has been pushed to the side. And after years of being called tinfoil hat wearing psychopaths and weirdos and every other name under the sun, now that we're finally getting some sort of confirmation that this phenomena exists, now we're being pushed out of the way as people who aren't credible. And I find that very disturbing.
Thank you.
Dave,
Thank you. Go
Dave,
ahead.
weren't you an experiencer yourself?
Yes, I have recollection of being taken about 8 times now.
From my understanding, reading a little bit about you, is that you didn't realize what summoning was, but you were actually summoning them, and you met 5 different species. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So when I first had my first experience, it had nothing to do with UFOs. I had an experience where I saw the angel of death in my mother's eyes. And 2 hours later, not knowing what channeling was, like I have a remote beside me right here. To me, channeling was flipping the channels as fast as you could in order to find something that was on TV. And I didn't know what channeling was. And 2 hours later, I ended up channeling the angel of death, who told me how to keep my mom alive. My mom has since passed last year, but it was an eye opener for me. And then I started working with a gentleman named Pascal, who became a real guru to me. And one day, when we were working on opening myself up, he's like, the ETs keep telling me, or my guides keep telling me the ETs want to contact you. And I said, hell no, absolutely not. I don't want any of that to happen. And he goes, what if you don't have a choice? Well, the next thing you know, we keep seeing lights over top of my house. And the experience has started, and it culminated in 2 days in April of 2014, 5 days apart, where I was at a friend's house on their 10-acre ranch, and I got called outside. I don't know why. I went outside, and I asked, okay, where are you? You called me outside, and on my command, a UFO lit up on the ground, 150 yards away from me. A nice short par 3, right? I think I could have aced it. But, I mean, that UFO I've never seen anything like that. 5 days later, I met a young lady named Samantha Mowat, who is a lifelong ET contactee. And I showed her, I met her at that farm again, and it was 2:00 in the afternoon. I walked into the back field with her, and she goes, let's go into the forest because I want to be able to see. I think we're going to see something. And I knew what we were going to see. And we walked into that forest, and she stopped me, and she jumps on this stump, and she goes, don't be afraid, but I want you to look that way, pointing north. Tell me what you see. And I turned, took a deep breath, turned, and looked. And about 200 feet in front of us was a 10 to 12-foot extraterrestrial staring back at us. And that really kicked things off for me.
Wow. Interesting. Don, why don't you get any question or opinions or anything?
Oh, do I have questions or opinions?
I'm asking the right guy. Yeah.
Okay. First, Dave, let me say that my wife, Vicki Cooper Ecker, is a journalism graduate, was a working journalist for years before she began publication of UFO Magazine, which we ran for over 20 years here out of Los Angeles. I am a medically retired criminal investigator. So when I came on board the magazine in 1988, I decided ahead of time I would treat this subject, this topic, like I would have treated any crimes or cases that I was called upon to investigate. Now, in over 20 years, I dealt with many people who alleged, because I have to say alleged, I wasn't there, that underwent the abduction experience, at least what they told me. Now, at the very beginning, I got to tell you, I found that intimidating. I was afraid of possibly saying something that might cause these people harm. And many of them appeared in very fragile states. I can remember one person who came into the magazine, wanted to speak to my wife and I about his experiences, and literally broke down sobbing and in tears. Quite frankly, I didn't know how to react to that. So I came up with a solution I felt. Number one, I said, look, if in fact you can maintain and deal with this remembered experience, let me suggest that, howsoever, if in fact you are undergoing physical problems, and quite a few of them allege that, and many of them showed me scars that they told me came from these UFO experiences. I said, well, in that case, allow me to suggest you talk to your family physician if you feel comfortable about that. After all, your physician is a professional. And finally, and in no way am I suggesting that you're mentally unstable, but if you find that this is something you're having a very hard time dealing with, then allow me to suggest that you seek professional counseling. Now, because we were in Los Angeles, there were several physicians and psychologists that we dealt with through UFO Magazine that were more than happy to take care of these people or work with these people. But this is such a tenuous aspect of the UFO field that I never felt quite comfortable dealing with any of it. Now, a number of those people that we ended up dealing with came in suggesting that the extraterrestrial visitors, if in fact that's what they experienced, had messages to give them to pass along. Now, I got to tell you, I'm a very pragmatic individual. I often thought to myself, if these people, these extraterrestrials or whatever they are passing along communications to give to the leaders of our government, well, quite frankly, why in the hell don't they contact the leaders of the government instead of going to, and I mean no disrespect, instead of going to Joe Sixpack that has about as much ability to get in touch with these people as a fly on the rear of the moon. Now, I became, because of what I was doing and how I ended up getting into this field, a historian. And I went back through years and years of reports, records, the giants that preceded anybody here today, people like Donald Kehoe, people like Richard Hall, people like Ivan Sanderson, okay? These guys were dealing with this business back from the early 50s up through the present until they passed on. Many of these people were very wary of dealing with this because at the time, there was a phenomenon within the UFO field called the contactees, all right? People like George Adamski and many others. And the one overriding theme at that time, and it was as popular as a skunk in a garden party, was we must get rid of our nuclear weapons. Now, hey, I'd be the first guy that would get in line to vote for that. But being the time period that was happening, being that there was a Soviet Union, being that the Soviet Union intelligence agencies were vastly working overtime here in the United States, the FBI became very, very concerned about that and saw that as a possibility of a KGB disinformation operation creating contention and unrest in the American public to do away with our nuclear weapons. Well, that would have never happened anyway. But it was just another aspect of the overall UFO thing. The UFO thing that was beginning to build. And as a result, starting about 1953, under the auspices of what was known as the Robertson Panel, a plan was instituted in this field to basically ridicule, demean, and basically shove out of the way the entire UFO topic. Now, of course, that never happened, but these people began to go after especially the public personalities in the field. And the contactees were a rife target. They went after them hammer and tong, which until the early 80s, and I knew Bud Hopkins very well, I knew David Jacobs very well, and they began doing a lot of research into the question of abductions. Now, let me just finalize this up. Do I believe that these people underwent some type of experience? Well, many of them, absolutely, yes, I do. Do I also believe, and have I witnessed, many people claiming this in order to achieve a little notoriety? Well, out here in Southern California, back in the 80s and the 90s, we had UFO conferences, UFO get-togethers every damn week. And my wife, Vicki, and I went to many of them. And hey, there were charlatans galore. Now, that's not to demean the people that believe they actually had some type of event that happened to them. But the charlatans were rife. As a matter of fact, in pages of UFO magazine, for about 6-7 years, I ran a frequent column called The Whistleblowers, where I would go in and do an in-depth investigation on some of the most vocal people in the field at that time. And I exposed them. All right, I exposed them. And boy, did that create some turmoil. Among other things, we were accused of being tools of the CIA, tools of the FBI, because we just wouldn't jump on any damn bandwagon. Well, the bandwagon was rickety in many cases. So the bottom line is, do I think that there's something to the abduction phenomenon? Yes. But do I have any idea what it all may mean? And I'll be the first to tell you I don't. But I also am very, very tenuous about getting closely involved with that, because the last thing in the world I would ever want to do would be to cause harm to somebody that had genuine problems with that. So with that being said, I'll shut up now.
All right, Mark, you're up. Let's
Don
hear your Mark.
Ecker, I love your voice, the way you enunciate, the way you, the cadence, all that. I mean,
You got to do the dog and pony sex show there. That's the one he likes.
the dog and pony sex show.
Yeah.
Is that what this is, Don? I don't know about that. You know what? All right, look, enough of that. I obviously, whatever crime I committed, I'd admit it to Don, because that voice would just bring it right out. I'd admit everything. Bottom line is, for me, and a lot of people watching this,
Don't think I don't have my eye on you, pal.
Oh, I know you do. Don and I have been friends for many, many years. We both had darker hair back in those days, but now we both have gray hair, Don. A lot of people know who I am. I'm a science guy, right? And so it's really difficult. You listen to what Dave says and you say, oh, it's all baloney because Dave is just spouting something that he experienced. Who knows what he really experienced? And that part's true. Who knows what he really experienced? It could be worse than he remembers. Okay. On top of that, I mean, it could be less, it could be embellished, maybe not. See, and because we know how people act, we know about the charlatans in our community. And I'll say it, we know about the Stephen Greers, charlatan, on record. I've always said that. I'm not going to take it back. Okay. And we know that people like that are out there that want to take your money and give you nothing in return. Okay. Just the promise to keep you, in the field. So that said, what is a science guy like me who's been formally trained in astronomy, physics, and all those things, and know Maxwell's laws and know all about radiation and how light works and all these things? What do you say to someone like that? Or as in Don's voice, what do you say? No, it's not exact. What do you say to someone like that when they have an experience they can't explain? That person being me. I've been there. I've had weird experiences. Now, as a science guy, right? And Dave will probably agree with this. When you think about stuff that you've experienced, you always second guess yourself. Did that really happen? Did I see exactly what I thought I saw? We are the worst observers, by the way. 10 different people will see a bunch of different things, that aren't all the same. They describe an event 10 different ways. I proved that actually when I was teaching UFO retrieval skills out in the desert in 2014 with a drone with a light on it. People thought it was a Raptor. People thought it was a small airplane out of control, but it was literally just me flying around a drone and trying to get their reaction. 30 people saw 25 different things. We documented it. That said, okay, yes, we're the worst observers. We have poor memories. We don't remember everything that we see exactly the way we saw it. But I will say this. There are certain experiences. There's a core experience that you've had that you're not going to forget. I had a number of those. Dave here has had a number of those apparently. So rather than sit here and say, Dave's full of crap. Okay. We listen to Dave and we listen to what he has to say because we're actually richer for involving ourselves in this phenomena. And as a science person, what do? You listen to all sides, don't you? You're not biased. You don't use prejudice. You don't say, well, I don't like Dave, so he's full of crap. No, we don't do that. In the world of science, you actually listen to all sides and you form a thought process. The thought process is, okay, if I think he's lying, I'm going to prove it if I can, right? If I think he's telling the truth, I'm going to prove it if I can. I mean, either way, it's all very important to do that. So and I saw chat comments, which are rather, ridiculous. The bulk of the people in the chat are wonderful, but a couple of commenters, I have to say, maybe they've had experiences they're burying, and that's the rebellion, and they're rebelling against it. I've seen that actually, where someone denies things to the hilt, and it turns out they're the ones that actually are worried that it happened to them. Okay, I've seen that a lot. So that's possible, but in all the experiences that I've had that I can't explain, I've done what you probably did, Dave, and that is try to explain them away, try to figure out a way that they make sense in the world I know, the 4 dimensions that I know, X, Y, and Z moving through time, science guy, right?
Yes.
All right. So that said, you've gone through that process. And so what I would say is that if you're being completely frank and honest with everybody, then we have no choice but to listen to your words and say, okay, this is what he experienced. And so if he experienced this, now what I want to do is find out why, find out how it happened, and see if we can repeat it and see if we can get data. Because I'll ask you right now, where's the photographs? And you'll say, I don't have any photographs. I didn't do that. I didn't take any pictures. And most of the time, the reason that is because when you're confronted with something that's absolutely astonishing to you, this is what people do.
Yeah.
They freeze.
Mm-hmm.
We all do. So it's not the person sitting on the side saying, well, where's the picture, smart ass? Okay. That's the guy who's not really understanding how the human body works. when the human body sees something that it doesn't understand, it freezes. So anytime you had to pull out a camera, you don't even think of the camera. Am I right about that, Dave?
I would like to respond a couple of ways. Mark, I love the way you built that out, because I think you're absolutely 100% correct. However, in today's internet age, especially with social media, the burden of proof is no longer there. Everybody wants proof, but photographs can be photoshopped. Video now with AI technology can be faked. Everything. So the question now is, number one, what is proof? I don't know what proof is anymore. I'm not an investigator. I'm a storyteller. I'm a journalist. And when I say storyteller, I'm not saying fake stories, creepypasta stuff.
I know what you mean.
Okay. But number two, with the advent of and the advancement of social media, science has become about opinion. We are not looking for scientific. Like, I look at scientists as people who are supposed to call things down the middle, like a referee in hockey or football. You don't have a side. It's black. That's why they wear black and white. Okay. But for a lot of the scientists out there and the citizen scientists out there, we are basing everything on opinion and guilty until proven innocent, rather than innocent until proven guilty. And I think that's a dangerous step for many people to take on that part. Okay. And please correct me if I'm wrong when I say that. But the third part I wanted to mention too is, for real experiencers, people who have had encounters with ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, wherever we want to go with it, the majority of people who've had real, true experiences, they never wanted it. They never asked for it. Okay. They're embarrassed by it. They're emotionally scarred, like Don said, by this action. I lived a happily boring life until that happened, until my experiences happened. I got to watch my hockey teams play. I got to go ATV riding anytime I wanted. I had my weekly poker game with my buddies. Then it started. And guess what took precedence? Learning everything about this, keeping me up till 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning each night, because I was too busy trying to research what the heck was going on with me and the experiences that myself and people around me were having. So there are a bunch of different steps to this, and it blows up the conversation into so many different avenues that it's tough to stay focused on just one aspect.
I agree. I just want to throw in one more thing there, Dave. People have asked, what got me into astronomy? Why did I go to school for astronomy? How come at age 9, I knew I was going to be an astronomer, and I never wavered? At age 9, I got through school. I made sure I got the grades. I went to the college of my choice. I got a wonderful degree in astronomy. Why did I do that? I did it because when I was 8, I had a missing time experience. And that missing time experience so affected me that I knew that there was something from out there that was involved in that missing time. And to this day, I don't know what it is. But I'll tell you this. That's the reason that I went down that path. And so many people, just like you say, change their whole lives when you end up having an experience like this. And that was just the start at age 9, right? So you can see that a lot of people can either ruin their lives with this, make something of their lives from this, and so forth. And, when it comes to people saying, oh, they just want to make money at it, you know what? We'd all like to get paid for doing the things we love. There's no doubt about it. Okay. And that's fair. But this is nothing you do for love. This is the kind of thing you think of at 3 a.m. Who's paying you? And then this is the kind of thing you work on projects for at 2 a.m., 6 a.m., all the way into the dark of the night. Who's paying you then? Nobody. Your passion is speaking.
How come we can accept a baseball player or a football player making $20-30 million a year for our team, but we can't accept somebody making, say, $100 a night on super chats on YouTube for doing the exact same thing?
Pure jealousy. Pure jealousy.
And by the way,
anybody can make an evening, criticism of something. watching somebody trying to make a few shekels, but very, very few people can be a pro ball player, a pro hockey player, etc. So, yeah. Hey, look, I wrote a novel in 2004 that was published. Okay. Believe it or not, people that I knew, weren't friends with, but people I knew, criticized me to the nth degree. Oh, he just did it to make money. Well, no shit. I did it to make money. Yeah, but it was also a labor of love. And making money doing something that you're working hard at is not a bad thing.
Yeah, and you just mentioned super chat. And by the way, I think YouTube takes something like 44% of that or something like that. So they take a big chunk out of that. So I'd like to just chime in for a minute and just say, when I first started this show coming up on 13 years ago, I stayed away from like the what they called abductees and stuff like that, because I thought it was a little too far to go. And then, I started thinking more deeply about it, like, well, and of course I put the human spin on it. If we're out there exploring, would we just go to a place and that's it? Or would we want to look at some samples, so what's living there and all that. And then, I ended up having a face-to-face conversation with Travis Walton early on, and also Jack Weiner from the Allagash, and I'm trying to think who else it was, Charlie Foltz, both from the Allagash incident. And, I got to tell you, looking right in their eyes and having the discussion, I think, I started saying, oh my God, there's really something to this. And one of the things that I've said it a number of times on my show personally, that I can't understand what it would be like having this happen in my life and still try to function in everyday things. I mean, I think it would be all absorbing, and there would be like nothing else I could think of. So let me hear what how is that with you? Would you compare that in any type of way with you, Dave?
I think it's almost there, but like I'm even reading a lot of the comments, people are like, where's the proof? We're tired of stories. We're tired of no evidence. And I understand that. I don't mean to shoot down that portion, because there should be evidence. But you got to realize a lot of people cannot prepare themselves for when the phenomena strikes. I mean, you don't know where lightning is going to strike. You don't know. Mark, have you been able to predict when a UFO is going to come in?
Oh, yes. In fact, I'm selling tickets to the next viewing for $1 million a piece.
You and Mr. Greer. Yeah.
Right. Do that.
Yeah.
Of course not, Dave. You're right.
I mean, even when I was able to summon a UFO, I didn't know when it was going to show up. We just knew that it was coming.
Summon a UFO?
Yeah.
And how did you manage that, Dave?
Oh, it's a weird process. It's a lot of meditation, concentration, a lot of woo stuff that I don't even believe myself. I mean, I had a couple of instances. One thing that I do want to say, that people who don't know me, 95% of my experiences that I've had have been with eyewitnesses who have seen it. Now, granted, Mark, I understand. I fully agree with you with what you said earlier about, we are the worst observers of all time. But I've been glad that the majority of my experiences have been able to have other people there to corroborate kind of what we saw when it happened. We had an experience this past summer, right in the middle of a forest out here where I live in British Columbia, where we had what we thought was a bear at our base camp growling at us. And then when we started running towards our base camp to kind of scare what we thought was a bear away, that's where we saw the UFO and two alien grays on the ground within 30 yards of us. And we actually may have actually got that on camera, may not. I cannot say whether or not we got it on camera for this film project that we might or might not be working on right now. So, trying to be specific.
Dave, I'd like to go back Dave, I'd like to go back and ask you about your experiences. You said you had experiences, but
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to you about your experiences with the 5 species. I think it's important to hear more in depth about that, especially
Sure.
when you name one of them Carl. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, Carl, that bastard.
Oh, he's a bastard, or is he
Oh,
a
he
good
just
guy or a
loves-
bad guy? What's his story?
He's a good guy. So April 20th, 2015. Yes, I know the coincidence with 420, and I do not take part in the hippie lettuce. Okay. I was broadcasting my show, and at my old house, I had my little makeshift studio at the front of my house, right beside my front door. And I had a Chihuahua Dachshund cross where if there was a crosswind, there'd be about 35, 40 minutes of barking. Right. And my other big dog would follow through. And all of a sudden, I was kind of facing the corner, like if there was no wall, I'd be facing the front door on the other side. And I had a window on my left. And out of my peripheral vision, I actually saw a something move out the window. And I'm thinking, oh, damn it. One of our friends came over for a late night coffee, which was par for the course at our house. And they forgot I got this stupid radio show going on now. And they're going to come to the front door. They're going to knock or ring the doorbell, and the dog's going to go crazy. And barking dogs in the background don't make for great radio. So after a couple of minutes, I realized that there was no sound at the door, and still saw something moving outside. Okay, well, who's here? I put my mic. I was interviewing a guy named Harvey Kraft. He was an author about Buddhist topics. So we were talking Buddha that night. And I put my microphone on mute. I swiveled my chair this way to look out the window, to stand up and look out the window to see who is there. And there was a giant alien gray head staring back at me from outside the window. So I did what any man would do. I screamed and I fell backwards in my chair. And I then jumped back up, and this thing was gone. Completely gone. And he needed a nickname, so I gave him the nickname Carl, and never saw him again. But I've had experiences where, Mark, you would probably know, or anybody would know, experiencers will have an understanding of the energy pattern when things are around. People who deal with ghosts feel that it's very heavy energy on their shoulders. People who deal with cryptids kind of have a fear of.
Do you feel you were abducted, Dave?
Oh, I've been abducted. Like I said earlier, I have recall of about 8 abductions.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I'm interested to hear about your abduction.
The first one happened on September 30th, 2014. Went to bed as normal. I'm a heavy sleeper, and I woke up to the feeling of children's fingers rushing through my head like this. And I picked my head up. I was like on a steel. I remember being like on a steel table, but it wasn't cold like steel. And I turned my head to the right, picked my head up, turned it to the right. There was no light, but I could see a light source kind of bouncing from the left. Turned my head over to the left, and there were 3 little gray dudes, about the 3.5, 4 footers standing there. And they were wearing these blackish silver bodysuits. And I remember thinking, holy cow, I've been taken. And I just kind of put my head down and okay, let's get this done. And I felt them cut open the back of my head and try to put an implant in. And next thing I know, I was laying on top of my bed, which I never do. Well, I don't sleep on my stomach. And I woke up and ran to the bathroom. My head was pulsing like I had a really bad hangover going on. And I ran to the bathroom, and honestly, does it make it sound gross? I had the best piss of my life coming back from that trip.
Let me ask you, Dave.
Sure.
Did you consult with a doctor? Did you have a scar back there? Is there any way to definitively ascertain that you, in fact, did have an implant? Were you
to be
medically
honest,
scanned?
no. To be honest, I was not. I did
Why?
go.
Why?
I did go to the doctor on a different occasion, and when he asked me what happened, I told him what happened, and he basically said, "You're right. I don't believe you." Right?
Did he
And
look?
not at my head. No, I never got my head checked out.
Jesus, that would have been the first thing I did.
Actually, Don, it might not have been. I'll tell you why. In a similar way, and you guys, I think, have heard this story from me before. In my old house, and the reason I had to leave the old house, I had a terrifying encounter over 3 nights, which, again, science guy, never happens to me. So what the heck, right? And never mind the details, but on the 3rd night, I remember something coming in, and I could basically see it. It looked kind of like it had a grayish hand. Couldn't really see a face, but then it had this protuberance, this silver long thing. Okay, that was kind of had a soft glow to it, and it started shoving it up this nostril. Okay, and it was putting it up this nostril, and I couldn't turn my head. Okay, because I couldn't move, and I couldn't move my eyes, which is really the most disconcerting thing. I tried to look at it, and I couldn't move my eyes, so I was fixed gaze. So I only had peripheral vision. Well, that next day, I'm sorry, that night, the way it ended was it was doing this thing, and I was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And next thing you know, it's morning, and I was on my belly on my pillow, and I couldn't breathe. Right, and I shoved myself off the pillow, and it was a pool of my blood in the pillow. I was almost drowning in my blood. So I went to the bathroom, and I tried to touch my nose. I was like, "Oh gosh, it feels like I was slammed in the face." Okay, so I took a shower, and I did what anyone would do who has such a terrifying experience. I completely forgot about it and went to work. Okay. Now, 2 years later, I noted, since that point forward, I couldn't breathe out of this sinus. So it took me 2 full years to go to an ear, nose, and throat surgeon. 2 full years. Every time I thought about going, I was like, "Nah, I don't need to do that. Nah, I don't need to do that." It was like I was being kind of, no, don't do that. You don't need that. You don't need that. Okay, fine. So I didn't. 2 years later, I finally did go. And he looked up there and he said, "Holy crap," he goes. This is a doctor, a surgeon. He goes, "You've got something huge up there." And he said, "We can take it out." I said, "Let's take it out." So he set up a time. He numbed it. He'd pull it out. And through this little tiny hole, something this big came out, the size of 2 thumbs. Okay. And it came through that little hole. And I've set off, and I felt like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall. You'll get it out. Yay. Right. Pulling that thing out of your nostril. Well, when it came out, my first question was, "Can I have that?" He looked at me like I'm an idiot. "No, of course not. What's wrong with you? I got to send this to pathology, make sure it's nothing bad." He says, "I'm sure it's just an ordinary polyp." He says, "Except it's the biggest one I've ever seen." And I went, "Okay, well, can those things seed around a foreign object in the nose?" See, I was leading into this, and I didn't want to say what it was. And he goes, "Yeah, I mean, like a splinter that a machinist might get." Yeah. Well, he says, I said, "Yeah, he said they could seed around that." I said, "Oh, well, can you have them check the middle of it?" "Oh, because you think you got one of those?" "Yeah, just have them check the middle." He goes, "Okay, why do you ask that? Do you remember the incident?" And I told him what I just told you, kind of, but with details. And he laughed, and as he said to Dave, as you heard, like, now he didn't believe you. Well, he said to me, "Nah, I'm sure it wasn't aliens." I went, "Oh, no, of course not. That's stupid. Why would I ever think that?" And so he said, "Call me in a week, and I'll let you know what the results are." Okay, this is at Hartford Hospital, by the way. It's all on record. It's documented, okay, professionally documented, not even by me, by the Hartford Hospital. So a week later, I called the doctor's office, and I said, "Hey, it's Marc D'Antonio." And the lady says, "Oh, hold on. Doc has to talk to you." I'm like, "Oh, no, it's like head cancer or something. What the heck? My head's going to fall off, boom, Well, anyway, he gets on the phone, says, "It's nothing to worry about. I'm sure it's benign." "Oh, you didn't get the results back yet?" And I heard like crickets. I'm like, "Doc, what is it?" He says, "Well," and he literally cleared his throat. And never forget this. He goes, "Well, this has never happened to me in 35 years of running this office." He goes, but the pathology office says they lost it.
I remember
Okay.
this.
Yeah. And so, but there's a parallel here. Okay, with what Dave's mentioning. Okay. And so the bottom line is that it took me 2 years to actually form the thought strong enough to actually go to the doctor and get it looked at. But it took 2 years. And if you
What's
think
your
of
conclusion?
my conclusion is that something strange happened that I can't explain. And from the night moving forward, notice I don't say an alien stuck an implant in me. Okay. There's a reason. Okay. Science gets in the way. Right. But the thing is, I conclude that something strange happened. And when the surgeon took it out, he sent it to pathology, as he claims, I would think. And pathology lost it. That's the official statement, the official record of what was in my sinus. Okay. However, what I actually believe happened was something a little bit more devious or sinister than that. Because I went to him a couple years later, right? And it turns out he had a top secret clearance at the time that he took this out of my sinus. All right. And I had one too at the time. I don't have it anymore. I got rid of it because it's too invasive. I've been doing work for the Navy for decades. You all know that. And so bottom line is that he reported it to his handlers in Washington because they have to report any potential national security risk, right? So whether this was real or not, they came and got it. Very simple. In fact, I was ordered to do the same kind of thing. And instead, I would call the program offices and tell them, hey, you got to tell people what this thing is flying in the sky, okay? Because they're calling it a UFO, and you're going to just get too much unwanted attention. And so they'd release a statement saying, oh, that's one of ours, kind of a thing. And then y'all go home. Well, bottom line is that when Dave has got is talking as an experiencer, okay, I'm sitting here thinking, you know what? I've been an experiencer too. And my perspective is a little different than Dave's. He's a journalist. I'm a science guy. So, but it's happening. Now, why is it happening to us? Why? I don't want this. I never wanted this. It's disrupted my life. It's made things horrible. I had to move out of my house because of it. I couldn't sleep in that room after that. Okay. So, my conclusion is it was strange enough that it made me leave my home permanently. So Don, I can't tell you what my conclusion is other than it was strange enough to make me actually leave my home that I chose. See?
Well, we're coming up on a break in just maybe 5 minutes or so. But I thought, unless someone had something they had to finish in this particular conversation right now, I'd like to read this question. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Richard is asking this question. Might the ETs be creating a hybrid race because they know what we instinctually tend not to be friendly with members of other tribes, and so they are creating a kinship with us? It's an interesting
David Jacobs,
question.
Dr. Dave Jacobs has a and I'm sure everybody here is aware of his thesis, is convinced that the extraterrestrials, in fact, are creating a hybrid race, ultimately to displace the natives here. You and I, we're all natives here, I'm presuming, okay? But that's Jacobs. Now, is it actually happening? I have no way of knowing, but back in the early 90s, Vicki and I had a very close friend and associate by the name of Dr. Richard Neal. Neal was a gynecologist, okay? Had a deep fascination with the overall UFO phenomenon. And he knew that both Vicki and I were friends and associates with not only Bud Hopkins, but also David Jacobs. So he asked us if we would get in touch with them and intercede with Dr. Neal. Because Neal, at this point in time, and you guys, if you've been in the field any length of time, will recall this, the missing fetus syndrome. Women would undergo what they believe to be an abduction experience, then believed that they were pregnant. And within 2 or 3 months, voila, everything was gone. Okay. Neil was trying to scientifically prove this. Well, he got in touch with Hopkins and Jacobs, and this always bothered me deeply. They refused to work with this man. Okay, they refused. Now, as a former criminal investigator, a detective, that told me there's a couple of possibilities here. Number one, the first possibility is Hopkins and Jacobs, quite frankly, and I'll be very blunt, found this aspect of the phenomenon to be bullshit. The other possibility was that Neil might steal their thunder if, in fact, this is real. But regardless, we never came to a conclusion with that. And like Mark said, he's a science guy. The idea is to investigate and research this to the nth degree until you can come up with a viable conclusion. This never happened with that aspect. Then, like so many other things in the UFO field, it just kind of floated away.
Chris, what's your I'm bringing you in because we haven't heard much from you tonight, and it's not
really
not your fault.
I'm more fascinated about Dave's story. I think it's fascinating because I've talked to a lot of abductees for the past few years. And one of the things I wanted to ask Dave is, when you were abducted, did you feel like there was something downloaded, information gathering that you were given? Because a lot of abductees say that they've been downloaded with some type of information. They can't figure out what it is. They have this feeling that there's some information that was given to them, but they can't draw it out consciously. Did you have that, Dave, by any chance?
Not while I was abducted. I did have an incident with a good friend. Maybe you guys know him, Olaf Phillips, and he's from the San Francisco Bay Area. And I go to bed one night, and all of a sudden at about 3:33, my phone rings, and I'm like, "Who's calling me at this time?" And I look, and it's Olaf Phillips. So I answer the phone. "Hey, Olaf," and I'm half asleep. "Hey, Olaf, how you doing?" The phone goes click, like a hang up, and then like a butt dial, and then my phone rings again, and it's Olaf, and the phone goes click. So I called Olaf right back and said, "Hey, Olaf, if everything's okay, get a hold of me. You just tried calling me twice." I left him a voicemail. 3:34, phone rings again, and it's Olaf again, but it's not Olaf on the phone. It goes, there was this sound, just trying to find the picture of it here. There was this sound that went doo, 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 just like that. And all of a sudden, I started seeing these weird images in my head of like a diamond with two horns coming out, going straight up. And they were all colors of the rainbow: purple, yellow, green, blue, red, orange, also brown, black, all sorts of colors. Just went doo, doo, doo. And then that happened. And I was trying to think, okay, what does this mean? What is the message here? What am I missing? Right? And I fell back asleep. I got a call the next morning around 11:30 from Olaf, and I'm like, "Hey, Olaf, how you doing? Everything okay?" And his first words out of his mouth were, "I didn't call you last night." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Dave, my phone has no record of dialing your phone at 3:33 in the morning." He goes, "Are you sure it was my phone?" I screenshotted the phone calls because you know how it times everything out?
Yeah.
I screenshotted those calls and I sent it to him. And he's like, "No freaking way. No way." that this happened, because he was busy, passed out. He had a good night with some work buddies, and the tequila got going, and he was long gone before we even reached that point, wherever he was at that point. And I don't know. I don't know what these shapes were. I don't know what anything was regarding it. But to this day, that's one of those mysteries. But no, getting to your point about downloads and messages of peace, love, and light, and, you know, we're all going to run around naked in a happy frou-frou village. I've never got that. Never got that.
It's the quite opposite that I've gotten. They've had terrible nightmares and frightening experiences, and information that they've gotten is destruction of this planet.
Yeah, I've never got the planet destruction. I don't even recall talking to any aliens. Okay. Now, on 2 occasions, I have seen people there with me. Dr. Bob McGuire, formerly of the CIA and NRO. One time when I was I like to call them dream states. Okay. One time when I was in this dream state, and I apologize, that might not be the correct term that I should be using. It's just what I call it. I had a dream that I was being chased in a hotel by 2 aliens, and Bob McGuire was there, and Bob was being chased by them as well. And I woke up the next morning. It felt like I didn't sleep a wink. Everything on my body was hurting. Every joint on my body was hurting. And the first thing I did was, once I got ready for work, I called Bob on my way to work, and I said, "Hey, Bob, how did you sleep last night?" He goes, "I tossed and turned all night." He goes, "In fact, my wife even got up because she thought that there were intruders in our house last night. She heard footsteps downstairs. So she went to check it out." I said, "Weird." So I told him what happened. He goes, "Oh, that's interesting." You know, typical science answer. That's interesting. But it was 8 hours later, he called me back and said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What's that, Bob?" And he says, "I checked my Fitbit last night. My Fitbit has me walking around for 90 minutes last night. I was in bed, Dave." He goes, "I don't recall waking up." He goes, "I talked to my wife. She doesn't recall me waking up. She usually gets up when I crawl out of bed to see what I'm doing. There was nothing."
Wow. Hey, we have to go into break, so we'll finish this story when we come back. Hang in, everyone. We'll be right back right after these messages. Hello, and we're back. And our guest, Dave, should be back in a moment. And also, there he is. And we're back, and we were talking just before the break. You were finishing up. Did you basically finish up there, Dave?
We're good on that story.
Okay. All right. I have a question for you.
I cannot hear anything.
Just this is all opinions, and I'll start with you, Dave. Okay. Say that David Grush came out this last June, and he had, when he started talking about the crashed UFOs, I went, "Oh my God, maybe that's way too far of a step or whatever." Say David Grush came forward, but he didn't talk about crashed UFOs or UAP. He talked about people having experiences, people that were getting abducted instead, and he had proof of this, and he had talked to witnesses. How do you think that would have gone? In this whole thing, like he did a whistleblower. Went through the whistleblowing process to do all that.
I think he has done that behind the scenes in the skiffs. And that's why we've heard people like Anna Paulina Luna all of a sudden talking about non-human intelligence and the potential of bodies and contact that we've had. I don't think that let me rephrase that. I do believe that what I was told a number of years ago by an insider, that this is labeled in steps. Step 1 was to try and get the UFOs added to the list of conversation through the term and acronym UAP, because people won't believe UFOs, but they sure as hell will believe UAP, because UAP can be defined as anything that's in the sky, from a bird to a drone to a UFO. And that's why they covered that part up with the nonsensical acronym. And I think that we're ready for that. They built that around the public. They built that as their stepping stone towards confirmation that the phenomena is real. I think we got to get the word disclosure out of our vocabulary, because I don't ever see disclosure happening. But I think David Grush, from everything that I've heard from insiders, he's a lot more powerful than what we think in the media, and him just speaking on this subject. He's actually leading a major charge behind the scenes, not only for himself, but for other whistleblowers to be protected and allow them to have their stories come out. So if he came out with UFOs and experiencers right off the bat, I don't think the public would have bought it. I think it would have been a lot more pushed behind the scenes than public, for sure.
Very interesting. Anyone else on that one?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Dave. Dave, what do you think of Sean Kirkpatrick? He basically, from what George Knapp says, stuck a knife into Arrow. And Sean Kirkpatrick has absolutely come up several times saying there's no proof of any alien existence or anything of extraterrestrial. What's your feeling of Sean? And after your comment, I'd like to play a short video of George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell just to get your opinion of that. But I'd like to hear what you have to say about Sean.
Sean Kirkpatrick, from what I've heard from my sources, is not to be someone who is trusted within trying to figure out what the best for the community is. We must remember he is a spook. He is a spook that needs to toe the company line. And, you know, much like Bill Nelson in NASA, I mean, we could blame Sean Kirkpatrick for covering up the Arrow program 100%. But I think the more criminal aspect of everything is Bill Nelson with NASA. I mean, here's a gentleman who on his first show at the podium after taking over NASA says he has interest in these UAPs, but never once mentions what's in NASA's closet. We have on record video of the pilots talking about or the astronauts and pilots, test pilots, talking about UFOs. There's the famous one from the pilot who was flying the X-15 at 315,000 feet, talking about how he was being followed in real time by a UFO. What was
Gordon
that?
Cooper.
Exactly.
How can you destroy G. Gordon Cooper's testimony? I mean, the guy is a national hero.
But that farce of a waste of money independent study that NASA did looking into their files, not one person asked what's in NASA's closets. What's hiding there? They have videos. They have videos from the space station. They have audio clips from astronauts from Darcy Weir, movie director Darcy Weir, did a great series on NASA about the Apollo, Gemini, and Mercury programs, where they have audio as well as public non-classified pieces of paper explaining quotes from these astronauts and pilots about what they saw. And for NASA to sit there and deny everything is a travesty to the organization. I mean, SETI is a travesty. After 50 years of looking into the sky, you're going to say you've seen nothing? It's all about covering it up.
So George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell says they sent people to Arrow, but Sean Kirkpatrick says they never showed it. Let me play this short video and see what you think about this.
Know that Arrow wasn't really up and running for that first year, and we know a lot more as well. How many of these articles, based on what Kirkpatrick said, have you read, and what's your take on it?
Look, man, from zero to Jeremy, what's my freedom to speak here, George?
Go for it.
Yeah, be myself, you always say, right? Cool.
It's your birthday.
Thank you. Total fucking horse shit. And Kirkpatrick is a piece of dog shit. So check this out. There's an information war. This is disinformation. This is a disinformation tour, and the public should know. And we're going to highlight it. He wrote an article in Scientific American. It was an opinion piece, right? There was literally nothing scientific about it, nor was it American. Because to be an American, you represent the people you're supposed to represent. This was the most ridiculous opinion piece that I have ever seen. So I read it. It was disgusting. I'll read you something from it. But also, he's a liar. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick is a liar. And he's lying to the American public. And I'll highlight one of the things that he lied about. You told me, and this was so interesting, you said, nobody's ever going to trust Arrow again. So before I go on, what did you mean from that?
I mean, he stuck a shiv right in the ribs of his own organization. Arrow. They didn't know where the heart of that organization was. Well, now we know that they were right to be concerned, because there were some of these folks that went to Arrow. There are people who shared information with Sean Kirkpatrick. He's saying it didn't happen. There's no good information at all. There's nothing of value from whistleblowers, and that's simply not true. But what it means is, going forward, now that he's still listed as a consultant to Arrow and has basically cut the gonads off of the credibility of his own organization, what whistleblower is ever going to come forward and trust them again?
I would like to have open comms with those people, because here's the deal. We did, on good faith, send people to Arrow, people that have confided in us, and we know how they were treated. We also know what they told Dr. Kirkpatrick. So let's get into the lies. You know, he put them at risk at their jobs, the jobs they're at now. Some of these witnesses, he put them at risk. And we can get into that more later, but that is unconscionable. Additionally, to go after David Grush, and let me just read you what he wrote so I can really nail this home, that he's a liar. This is not just a disinformation war. He's a liar. So in his article, where Kirkpatrick said in the Scientific American, which was neither scientific nor American, here's a quote. And I'm gonna tell you where he puts quotes. As of the time of my departure, none, let me repeat, none of the conspiracy-minded, in quote, whistleblowers in the public eye had elected to come to Arrow to provide their, quote, evidence and statement for the record, despite numerous invitations. So let's just take David Grush. Is that true? It's not true. That's a lie. So there are FOIA-able back and forths between Kirkpatrick and David Grush that will become public. I have seen them.
Wow.
Dave, I'd like to get your opinion on that, and everybody's opinion.
Well, it'd be nice if Jeremy didn't have to swear.
Yeah, I know. Now I'm going to have to change the explicit thing on the on the podcast. Yeah.
You know, I've talked to one whistleblower who reached out to me about a month ago, and he cannot come public just yet. He's trying to, but he's waiting for whistleblower protection in order to come out. I have had this gentleman vetted by a friend of mine who works in an alphabet agency. So I know this guy is telling the truth, or he's truthful with who he says he is. He tried to reach out to Arrow to no avail. He sent emails. He sent phone calls to Kirkpatrick. Nobody ever got back to him. Not a soul. And I believe we have to understand that, and I saw a comment in the chat room regarding this, you know, Susan Goff, who does the PR for the Pentagon and all the alphabet agencies, she runs that place with an iron fist. She really does. And she's not on board. We know that she has tried to downplay the level of importance of Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon through prior tensions between those two and Goff. And we know that she was one of the ones who handpicked Kirkpatrick for his role in Arrow. I think Kirkpatrick I wouldn't call him a liar. I would say his hands were tied, and knowing that he was towing the government line for about another year and a half before he got full pension and retired, that he wasn't going to upset the apple cart due to his pension and what he is talking about there. So I don't believe Kirkpatrick whatsoever. There's more than a plethora of evidence that shows that what he is saying is not true, unless every video that we have seen is not UFO, and every piece of evidence that have been provided by whistleblowers and people who have spoke in front of Congress, as well as commercial pilots who have had encounters, is false testimony as well. So it's very hard to take what he says without any sort of skepticism.
Yeah. I personally just would like to chime in and just say that Mario Woods, I've become pretty good friends with him over the last few years. He actually did testify. He's a firsthand witness. He had, there was an incursion over November 5, a nuclear missile site in South Dakota or North Dakota, I can't remember. And he was out there, and, you know, there were beings involved. He didn't really want to talk about that too much, but he did. In the 4 hours and 19 minutes that he testified to AARO, he told them everything. And he's a firsthand witness. So how can Kirkpatrick say that? You know, I mean, here he is, a veteran. He went through a very traumatic situation, and he talked about it, and he did it the right way. He did it through that he made that deadline they had for whistleblowers and all that, and he said they didn't ridicule him or anything. They listened to him, and firsthand witness right there. So, what do you think on that, Mark?
I'm of the mind that, you know, when you look at, I watched that whole congressional hearing, and my feeling is that Graves, Grush, and Fravor were telling the truth as they saw it. I didn't think that there was anything inappropriate there. I personally feel that David Grush was actually asked if he wanted to be the guy that releases the information, because he probably had an interest in it. And this, see, from a psychology perspective and talking to people in that world, he was all too eager to talk about it. In fact, he was giddy about it. That's what happens when someone has tacit permission to talk about something and knows they won't get in trouble for talking about these things. Now, when it came to the classified stuff, he said, well, I can talk about that in a closed session, but not here. And that's fine. Okay. And I know why. It's not because it was alien technology. Okay. It was actually because of our technology used to see potential alien technology. And that's the reason why it was a classified briefing. It had nothing to do with what the alien, if it was alien technology was. It had to do with how they acquired that technology, because they'd have to explain it. And kind of having worked in that arena, I know that there's technologies that they want to keep quiet. So the findings based on those technologies are also kept quiet and put under wraps. But they can come out in certain cases. And in this particular case, it was the closed hearing they had to have, which they had. And then some of the folks that were in that hearing who came out, the ones that could listen, came out with a changed view. And they had a changed view of the world a little bit. And you could hear it in the way they were responding, didn't you? So if it's a misinformation campaign and they're lying, well, I know they're lying, first of all. There's more that they could release that they did not, obviously. I have a feeling that it has something to do with the fact that they know that this technology is there and all around us, and there's nothing they can do about it. So the extent to which it's around us is what they're hiding. Remember my situation, okay, on the U.S. sub, right? Decades ago, that's plural, decades ago, I was on board as a guest, okay? And I know some people bristle when you say, "Oh, you're a guest." Yeah, well, too bad. Stuff it. That's what we're talking about. That's what it is. That's as far as it's going to go. But I was, as I said, I've done work for the Navy for decades. So I was on this sub at sea, and they saw something rip through the sonar at several hundred knots. Okay, several hundred knots. Right. So look, where's that story? Where do you hear about it? You heard it from me. You didn't hear it from anyone else because they haven't talked about it, except they tracked it. They were able to track it. And on the boat, in this particular boat, they basically, the executive officer told the sonar guy what to do with the observation. He said, log it and dog it. Okay, so log it and get rid of it. Okay, hide it. Doesn't mean destroy it. Hide it. Now, a few years later, I did a job for the Joint Chiefs, the big guys. And I actually was sitting with one of the chiefs, all right? And I asked the chief this question, because on the boat, they called it a fast mover. And I asked him, sir, what can you tell me about the fast mover program? And his response wasn't, get him out of here, arrest. No. Okay, we had a working relationship. So he basically said the following, and I'm not going to get in trouble for this because it's public. He said, I'm sorry, I can't talk about that program. I went, okay, that's fine. Anyway, how's the wife and kids? You move on. So that's, I drove back from Washington that day like this. Holy cow, it's real. It was like, I knew it was real, but they admitted it. That guy, listen, the guy that's in command of the Navy probably knows a few things. Okay, so when he said that to me, I was blown away. I suspected, though, it was coming, but when you hear it, when you hear those words from someone, it's like, whoa, holy, mind, So anyway, so I ate up the hearing, listened for, again, I've taken so many polygraphs for all the programs I was in and out of that I'm very familiar with how they work and how when people lie. I'm not an expert at reading lies. I bet you Chris is better at that than me. Okay, or that guy down in the end there, that Dark Matters guy there. What's his name? Decker. Yeah, I'm sure he's better at it. But the bottom line is they can tell when people are lying. I kind of get an inkling when someone's lying. And listening to that hearing, I didn't hear lying. I heard people holding back information is what I heard. See? So I was on board with it, and I felt that it was a good thing. If you don't believe in disclosure, that's fine. But you're little by little, it's sort of happening right before our eyes, right? When would the Congress seriously listen to 3 top-ranking people in the military and in the CIA arena? When would they listen to people and publicize it like they did? Yeah, there was a closed hearing, blah, blah, blah. So what? The public side is what's important. They're disclosing something. Now, is it for a greater end? Have they got some kind of hypersonic technology that they want to cover up and use UFOs and put in a little foil to kind of cover our little malevolence down there with these hypersonic weapons? Maybe, but I seriously doubt it. I think that this is just a topic whose time has come. And I think that they're finally saying, you know what? Let's just tell them about it.
Yeah. And that your situation was decades ago. So if they had that technology, it seems like we would know more about that.
The ability to see on the sonar, they didn't have the technology to chase and capture, and they still don't. So thank you. That reminds me. That's the point, Martin. The directive is not seek, destroy, capture, detain. Okay, it's observe and report, because we can't do anything about it. And keep it under wraps. We don't want to let other navies know what's going on or that we're actually listening to this stuff going on. And for heaven's sake, don't tell the folks in the public, because then they're going to want to know and they're going to pester us forever. And yes, we will pester them forever. There's no doubt. But the thing is, it's just the program. Observe and report, because that's all we can do. They don't want the American people to know that we're so incredibly out of our element with these creatures. Okay,
I think you're right.
Yeah, and there was a comment earlier in the chat about interdimensional travel. In fact, that's something that I've actually gotten quite on board with. In fact, I do lectures all over the country about this, and you know about this. It's we have 4 dimensions, and we're talking about a 5th dimensional travel element. And if they can slip into that 5th dimension, then what they do is they punch out from here and punch back in from this 5th dimension. So they don't move in a straight line here. What they do is they go from a spot in our 4 dimensions, XYZ moving through time, into the 5th dimension by punching out there. And that's a whole process we talk about in another show. And then they punch back in, maybe say a foot ahead of where they were. And they do this zigzag the whole time. And if you look at it visually from our 4 dimensions, it looks like something traveling in a line. It's really not. It's phase out, phase in, phase out, phase in, phase out, phase in. And they're doing that over and over and over. And it's all computer controlled or AI controlled at their level of technology. So to them, it's an automatic process. It's like stepping on the gas pedal for us with a car. We go from A to B. And that's what's happening there. It's automated. So they're just oscillating back and forth between this 5th dimension and our 4 dimensions. They're neither here nor there. And, that explains exactly how they operate to me, right? So from a technology point of view, I was looking for that in the congressional hearings. I didn't hear any of that. That's okay.
But you heard about it afterwards.
Yes,
there was
right.
something went on in the skiff about it. And I did want to talk to that to our guest tonight. But before I do that, and along these lines, Mark, I did want to, I was going to go there after I wanted to see, Don, did you have any opinion on the clip that Chris played or anything you want to add to any of that?
Everybody here, with the possible exception of Dave, basically know where I come down on this entire disclosure process. I gave my reasons why I believe this will never happen. And quite frankly, and I don't want to belabor this, but quite frankly, watching that clip with Corbell kind of pissed me off. Okay. I don't want to go any further into that. There's a lot I could say. I'm not going to say. So I'll stop it there.
Well,
okay.
So you get into the good part,
Thank you.
Don.
So Dave, this is what I was going to ask you. How would you view that your encounters with these beings, whatever they were, could be something that was, and it's a little off of what you were talking about, Mark, but just the theory of interdimensional, that seemed to come up. That's come up lately, sort of like a buzzword, a little bit of a buzzword. But could you theorize that it's a possibility of what you've been interacting with had something more to do with interdimensional, or do you think that it's from another faraway galaxy or star system or whatever?
Good question. I have debated this so often on whether or not there is interdimensional travel and or time travel going along with things. I think it could be a combination of everything. It is scary if they are time travelers, because it just shows that an evolution of humanity is going to be very ugly in the future. We're not going to be looking like we are now. And for some of us who have faces for radio, maybe that's a good thing. That being said, Don, I would 100% agree with what you're saying. I don't believe in the disclosure movement at all. I really don't believe that we are in disclosure. That's why on our show on Spaced Out Radio, we call it confirmation. We're in a confirmation movement that there is something strange going on. Disclosure means tell all. And that doesn't matter how wacky the story is, but confirm or not confirm anything that's happened. Whether it's Eisenhower meeting aliens, whether it's Lazar at Area 51, whether it's, bodies in Roswell. It could be anything of the topic. That's disclosure. That's true disclosure. And what we are seeing is a confirmation. But getting back to your question, Martin, in regards to what I think my encounters have been from somewhere else, out in space. That's what I'm tending to believe. But do I have proof of that? No, I do not. It could be interdimensional. It could be time travel, but I think it's a combination of all three. We just haven't figured it out.
Anyone want to jump in on that opinion?
I've jumped in enough.
Well, there's a congresswoman that came out, I guess, after they had a briefing on it, and she said, now, whether it's true or not, that David Grush never mentioned anything about extraterrestrial aliens, but he did mention, interdimensional type of situation, and he's always been alluding to that. Apparently, he had a briefing with some Wall Street people and some government people in New York City just recently, where again, I think the topic was based more on interdimensional. Dave, did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, there was some thin words that came out about that topic where he did mention about interdimensional species and everything like that. But, why are you speaking at Wall Street? I think that's the bigger mystery that we need to look into. And one of the things that I am trying to figure out, and I don't have a good grasp on it, maybe you gentlemen can help me as well on this, is I think right now what we're seeing is a very dangerous disclosure for dollars movement. There's a lot of different companies and organizations that are pushing to get into the money game. I mean, we've seen it with Ryan Graves. We've seen it with Enigma Labs, which is an entire different entity that's, if the rumors are true, and Mark, I'm sure you've heard him being part of MUFON, they are trying to take out MUFON within the next few years.
I also where did you hear that, Dave?
Sources.
I also have it on some reasonably good authority that they're actually doing very poorly.
Well, of course they are, because
I know someone that's leaving there actually.
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, I would like to hear that off the
record. Let me pop in for just a second, and especially on UAP Crossfire, we've been kind of kicking around the idea of interdimensional versus extraterrestrial, blah blah blah. Hey guys, if in fact either of those options are real, ET, interdimensional, what the hell is the difference? They're both alien. So for the sake of the discussion, they're alien. So I don't see what the big deal is about those two things.
I agree. They're alien to us, whatever they are. That's for sure. And I also want to say, Mark, you mentioned something about, I believe you said earlier that the reason that they're not being so transparent about it is because they don't know everything. And I say that a lot. I do believe that is true. And because they don't know anything, they don't want to look like fools saying we can't protect you because we don't really know exactly what's going on.
They don't care
I think they know a lot more than we know, but I don't think they know everything.
They don't care about the being made fools part. They care about how it looks to our adversaries. Okay?
Right.
That's what it is.
Yes.
They care about what
Absolutely, Mark.
So that drives secrecy, not whether they look like, in fact, they order people to look like fools in order to protect the secrets. All right. They order people to stay silent when they might have overstepped their bounds a little, and they order them to retract and take back and to, face some kind of penalty, even if it's only on paper. Okay. In order to protect the secrets that they've been trying to cover up. So the secrecy is driven by not wanting to give away to our adversaries anything that they could potentially use against us or get a technology leverage against us. They don't mind being made of fools. In fact, they look for that. Okay, they actually look for that opportunity because then they have somebody they can blame it on and say, oh, no, see, hey, they said something out of turn over there. They're fools. Okay, and that guy that accidentally revealed some technology, I have a personal history of knowing how this happened with several cases where I worked on projects. Okay. They just threw the guy under the bus and basically said, you're the fall guy because you said something. Now you could possibly give our adversaries a way out. So we're going to make an example of you. You're going to be coming out publicly and saying you made a mistake. And they had to. Okay. and it wasn't a mistake. It was factual, but because it was something that was going to give away information to our adversaries, they chose to make that guy fall on the sword for it. And they do that a lot, So they may know more than they let on, but what you heard in that congressional hearing was what they wanted you to hear. Okay. That's why, as I said, when Grush was talking, he was smiling the whole time and nodding. Okay. Why? He was immune. He knew he was immune to controversy and to problematic or treatment and to any kind of punishment because he was saying what they told him to say. All right. He was totally immune, acting like a little kid on the school ground. I know a secret and I get to tell it. That's kind of where it was going. And he basically, I think, disclosed what he was told he could disclose. So yes, there's more. We all know there's probably more. But I felt it was actually quite an eye-opening congressional hearing, because here we were now, the Congress of the United States, 3 high-ranking people, all saying things that we want to hear to Congress. All right. First time in history. That was actually a very important maneuver. And was it all generated? No, I don't think it was fake. I think it was actually a measured, careful release of data, and not nearly all the data. They didn't say anything about how many submariners in many different navies around the world see these things all the time. Okay, they didn't give you that information. They didn't tell you about the SOSUS nets, the underwater sound hydrophones all over the oceans, which heard the Titan sub implode, which can hear whales farting thousands of miles away. They didn't tell you about all of the strange sounds they heard that were tied directly to strange artifacts that they can't explain, things that make no sense, not magma movement, not biological movement. In fact, one submariner told me on our boat, we called those jellyfish because we had no other box to put it in. Right.
Huh.
So that's how it works.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have Darcy Weir coming up. He's going to be on my show coming up on the 19th of March. I'm just putting that out there because he's done a movie about the USO phenomenon.
I was in it.
There's a lot of people.
I remember, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I saw you in it. Yes.
Yeah, he's a good
so
guy.
Anyway, that's really good. But what I wanted to kind of stay on this, and he's also coming up on UAP Crossfire eventually in April as well. I'm gonna arrange that as well.
Martin, I'd like to Dave a question. I'd like to go back.
Okay, all right. I'll go back to where I want to go.
Dave, you touched on something, and I'd like to ask you if we can talk about it further. Do you think there's a war within ufology right now with the different groups? It's because when you mentioned Enigma Labs, that kind of said, "Wait a minute, what's he going? Where's he going with that?" So I'm asking you, do you think there's a war going on with ufology groups?
I think there is a counterintelligence war going on right now that I have actually, with some of my Canadian sources, have been told to be very careful with what we're putting out and what we're listening to from people who are so-called insiders right now, because there is a counterintelligence program going on to try and get UFOs and UAP swept back under the rug. I look at a group like Enigma Labs and what, and this is my opinion. This is, everybody can go do their own research, but there's a lot of red flags there, guys. I mean, when you look at the fact that even the person who put Enigma Labs together, Alex Smith, who is the great granddaughter of a former British prime minister, she goes to the Seoul conference that Gary Nolan put on, and she's the only one who taped over her name, so that way nobody knew who she was. Why? Why did a group led by Peter Thiel put $7 million into the coffers of this? Why bring on a press person who has no experience as a press person, who literally downplays experiencers and everybody into that important position? Why did they block their Twitter account so that way nobody can respond on there when we have questions about what they're saying, and saying that, going back to their initial tweet, to paraphrase, we are not going for government contracts. However, we look forward to working with groups like the U.S. Army and NASA. Okay, why was Enigma Labs, who came out of nowhere, all of a sudden invited to NASA's premier first annual UAP conference? Yet MUFON, with 50 years of experience, was shut out. MUFON should have been there, not Enigma Labs. But I mean, that's nitpicking. Okay, and I get that. But when you go through their website and you read the red flags on, they're not telling you who works for them. They're not telling you who or what happens to your reports. They're not telling you what you have to do in order to submit. They just want your information. They've also been throwing around money to a lot of people to try and get them to move their files into Enigma Labs' hands. I was talking to one researcher, a very popular researcher, who told me he was offered 6 figures in order to give them his entire 30-year archive. Okay, they tried to get actual journalists to move on over to report for Enigma Labs at 6 figures. They are throwing money left, right, and center to try and take over this. And the unfortunate part about it is, because they're so secretive and not really playing by a real fair way of doing things, they aren't getting a lot of support. They're trying to bully people.
In full disclosure, neither my wife or I were ever contacted by them. I wish the hell they would.
In your opinion, David, you think they're connected to the U.S. government?
100%. 100%. And if you go on their website, one thing that I learned in journalism, and Don, you probably learned this through law enforcement, is when you learn to read between the lines, that's where the real story is. And if you go on their website, and one night we did this on the show where we went through paragraph by paragraph of everything on Enigma Labs' website, and it triggered a number of red flags to the point where I literally said to my audience, don't move your stuff here. This sounds dangerous, right? Because in one hand, they're telling you they don't want government contracts. They don't want to be government affiliated. But the next thing you know, they're working with government agencies and trying to get that, almost that Bigelow effect where, you know, at one point in the FAA handbook for pilots, it said, if you see something anomalous in the skies, call Bigelow Aerospace or BASS at such and such a number and report it. And that's a true fact.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's what they were trying to do. And they think because everybody's looking for money, they got $7 million from Peter Thiel, the owner of Palantir, who also happens to be one of the
is that a computer company, Dave?
Pardon me?
Isn't Palantir a computer company?
Yeah, Palantir, one of the things that they do is they run all of the alphabet agencies and military's anti-hacking software.
Really?
So they combat it, right? And, you know, I mean, then you look at all of a sudden a story that we broke on our show 3 weeks ago. It looks really suspicious for what happened to MUFON's CMS system being hacked.
That's right.
And MUFON Canada, both of them getting hacked. Now, thankfully, from what we know, and Mark, maybe you can confirm this, for what I know or what's been reported, that none of the data has been stolen, but you still can't get into the CMS. And I was told by one Canadian official it's going to be months before this is cleared up. And it wasn't just somebody with a ransomware attack. So was that from the inside, knowing that Enigma Labs, or the rumor is Enigma Labs wants to take over MUFON in 10 years, hypothetically speaking?
They have to be around for a while, but I don't know. I mean, the CMS is still down as we speak. I just tried because I'm their chief photo and video analyst, so I can't get in to analyze and look at any of these documentation. So
yeah,
it's still down now.
The FBI are looking at that too.
Yeah, because it was a denial of service attack on MUFON.
Yeah.
So it's a federal case now, and that's actually going to bode very poorly for any hackers that may have done
Yeah.
it, because it means that Interpol is going to be involved.
I do want to clarify, I'm not saying Enigma did this. I am not saying that at all. All I'm saying is it looks very suspicious that MUFON has been hacked and the database hasn't been touched.
Yeah, that is something. And so if this Enigma Labs is funded, I mean, that kind of, and funded pretty strongly, in my opinion. Whenever you mix this type of thing with money, things seem to happen. When they're, there's some suspicion there, whenever there's incentive that involves money and information. So yeah, I had no idea how all that came about. So thanks for, filling us in on all that.
Thanks, Dave.
I wanted to shift gears. What's that, Chris?
I just said thanks, Dave, for answering that question.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So I wanted to shift gears just a little bit, just for an opinion here. We when we were talking about, the theme of the show and that type of thing, and it wasn't just experiencers, it was also people that have had UFO encounters and things like that, and there's been a real focus on military, but it's kind of like not really looking at any of the other encounters that, witnesses such as, say, policemen or, anyone other than military. There's some major things that have happened over the years, and a lot of really good, credible witnesses. And I think that's kind of a shame. I understand that they're looking into military mostly because the data is more easy to get a hold of and things like that. But we also have there's plenty of information, I'm sure, when it comes to the FAA and, non-military. And so I just wanted to kick that around if anyone has an opinion on that in particular.
Well, in Vietnam, I was in Southeast Asia for 26 months. I was a member of the United States Army. And I got to tell you, there were a number of cases that have happened during the course of that conflict. Several of them actually happened very close to where I ended up stationed on the demilitarized zone. Now, this was prior to my time there, but in 1968, toward the latter part of the year, several objects flying in headed south from North Vietnam, which of course was the communist North, into the former Republic of Vietnam, were sighted on radar. And the Air Force launched several F-4 Phantom jets to interdict these things to find out what they were. Now, the immediate reaction was, good God, the North Vietnamese are flying MiGs down there. And that's not what it was. What it was still is unknown. But the Phantom jets, the F-4s, scrambled, got up there, got a radar lock on at least one of these things, fired their missiles, made a direct hit. This thing blew up and came down right on smack dab in the middle of the DMZ. Now, the next day, at this time, this was primarily a Marine Center of Operations, U.S. Marine Corps. They sent some patrols up there to find out what in the heck it was that came down. And they located the spot where this thing crashed, or they thought it crashed. All they found was an immense burned spot. No debris, no junk, no airfoil, nothing. Now, that was a very strange occurrence. And quite honestly, they were flummoxed by that. Now, there's a river up there, there were also, during the war, the United States Navy had gunboats up there patrolling.
PBRs.
Yes. And they had reportedly a number of accounts where they witnessed discs coming in. But one of the strangest reports, and this was even documented by, I believe it was Mr. John Keel, who documented this. Military RTOs, radio transmitter operators, picked up some transmissions on some very odd frequencies. These frequencies were in common usage during the Second World War. And these transmissions, which were recorded, sounded, and this is going to sound crazy, but sounded like they came from World War II military encounters. They never figured that one out either. Now, what are we talking about here? Was this pure BS? Or was maybe there some kind of breakdown in interdimensional space? I don't know. But actually, they always sent a chill up my back.
Don, how many years ago was that?
Vietnam.
What?
Yeah, when you were there, how many years ago from today, or from the
time I went over in 70. I went over in 70, and I was wounded in 72 and left. So that's what?
Right,
that's 52 years.
Okay, and at that time, they were hearing World War II conversation.
Somebody did, yes, reportedly. I didn't hear it. Okay,
so around,
I didn't mean
1970.
to suggest I heard it, but yeah.
Okay, no, that's okay. But it was like around 1970 when they heard World War II era communications from 1945 or 40, 44.
Whenever, yeah.
All right. So if those were communications, let's just spitball and have fun. If that was communication being played to people on the ground to try to say, hey, look, we don't know the language, but let's communicate with what we've picked up in the past, then that means that they've come from a certain number of light years away, where if they're traveling as quick as I think they do, then they can get to our planet in a very short amount of time. And so therefore, this interdimensional travel would put them here mere minutes from the time that they might be like many light years away. So how many light years away would they have to be to hear that? They'd have to be, 1970 to 1944, say, right? So maybe they heard it when that information got to them, and they recorded it and said, hey, let's keep that and let's play it back to these ants when we get there. And then they get here, and of course, for us, it's years and years later they play it, and it's something from these aliens past, because it was recorded in their history annals, back in the time when it was only from their perspective 1944 on Earth, because it takes light that long to travel to their location. If they're going to record a conversation from us, they're going to get it from however long away it is and through how much time elapsed. Then they come here and play it, and it could literally be to them just a few minutes ago, but to us, it's 40 years ago, 30 years ago. So I think that's
I never even considered that, Mark. But actually,
I bet you didn't.
that's a brilliant supposition.
Yeah, my brain hurts. Yeah,
I'm sorry, but if you think about it, right? If you think about it and work it through, if they could travel relatively quickly and just say a few days, then to them, they might have just recorded it, because they might be, because it was 1970, they might be 35 light years away. So what that tells you is now we have a 35 light year radius around our planet to look for intelligent worlds.
Right.
With the James Webb Space Telescope. Ooh. Ooh. Ooh.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and I could be totally washed up about this too. So, you know,
Yeah, but in a certain weird way, it makes sense.
it was certain,
But a weird way.
weird, yeah. Yeah, weird.
So we
is
get
good.
about 4 minutes or so left. And so I guess I wanted to ask you, Dave, what do you think about the non-military, encounters that people are having and not being paid attention to, basically, looked at as any type of information from the past?
Well, I think that any time the military or the government gets involved, that's where things get complicated. That's where they try to complicate things to make things more difficult, to help people lose interest. And I think we see that with a lot of the acronyms like UAP and NHI. And I think it's confusing to a lot of people. Whereas we could have a defined conversation with anyone on what a UFO is, or aliens or extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them. I think we're complicating it on purpose. I think that the more the government gets involved, the less it's about we the people. And that's a dangerous part for our mission here. Look, we all want disclosure, but disclosure is not going to happen. And we need to take disclosure out of our vocabulary, call it a confirmation, because they are confirming that there is something happening. They're not confirming what it is, how much they know. Let's remember, the U.S. government has a lot of secrets at places like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Area 51, and others that they don't want you, me, or the adversaries to know about. And that all covers under UAP. Lou Elizondo's publicist said it best, that was just put out the other day. He said that Elizondo is one of the premier investigators into UAP and UFOs. There is a difference between the two, and we keep exaggerating the UAP effort in order to try and bring it all together because it's the popular term.
Well, the term
Right.
UAP originated because UFO connoted tinfoil hat. So they had to rebrand it because they intended to actually talk about it seriously. And every time you mention the word UFO, someone's in the back room blowing up a green plastic alien and putting out in front, okay, and giving you the tinfoil hat. So UAP approved by the government. Therefore, it's not silly anymore, and we could talk about it, but it's exactly the same thing.
Well, I was told by an insider at Area 51 that UAP are man-made, UFOs are not.
I don't buy that. I think they're just the same term for the different, the same term, same phenomenon, different term. I don't think that's the same. I don't think.
Dave, I'd like to ask you this.
We're running out of time, though, Chris. Just to let you know.
Great, real quick. Some people say that the real, true disclosure would frighten people so bad that they wouldn't be able to handle it. What's your comment on that?
My quick comment on it in 30 seconds or less is that we need to remember that this is not going to affect just the United States. This is going to affect every person on the planet, whether they live in the jungles of Africa and Brazil or whether they're in the concrete jungles of every city. We got to worry about the economy. What's it going to do to fuel? What's it going to do to religion? There are some big issues that need to be dealt with before we say we're not alone.
Well, thank you. This has been a very interesting night, and I appreciate, Dave, you joining us. And
Thank you.
spacedoutradio.com, there it is right there. You can see it on the screen. And so check that out. And what day do you run your show?
Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. And then we have a weekend show host with Rob G as well.
Oh, you're a busy guy. Wow. Excellent. Thank you all. And we will be back next week. I'm not sure if I'm going to be here, but I appreciate all you folks watching us and listening to us. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week.